All right, everybody. Hey, welcome. I'm really happy to have you here today. This is my third line day videos, and I haven't posted in quite a while, and just been waiting for something to respond to, um, and I found it. I got my friend, more than a friend. I've got Tom Pfeiffer here. Tom was my initial analyst when I came into human design in 2010. We've been on quite a journey together, and I'm just really excited and grateful to introduce Tom to all of you today. And because Tom has been such a huge part of my human design journey, and has really made the system and the teachings and the knowledge all come alive for me in a really special way. The fact that I have an amazing mentor and friend, but you know, to have someone to talk to and to hang out with, and over these 13 years or so, and I've met Tom 20 something years ago. Our paths have crossed in lots of synchronistic ways over time. And so we have a really special relationship. And so I could keep talking either way, but really happy to have you here, Tom, today. And Tom Pfeiffer, 6'2", emotional manifesting generator, quad right, um, cross of migration, and is welcome. I'll let you. I'm doing all the talking. Here you go. Welcome, Tom.
Well, thanks. It is absolutely delightful to be with my friend Peter Burv, as well as my brother Peter Burv, as well as my student Peter Burv, as well as my teacher Peter Burv, because it has just been a remarkable experience we have had. And we'll keep it to design rather than a story. But boy, do we have a story, right?
We sure do.
So yeah, it's been a privilege to watch Peter, the sleeping phoenix, waking up. I remember sitting at on his porch in Denver some years back, and I said, Pete, man, there is an awakening coming your way because you are here to wake up so you can wake others up. And this is precisely where things have gone with the two of us. And it's just been a remarkably wonderful and mutual exchange and brotherhood and sisterhood and motherhood and fatherhood and any kind of hood it wanted to be in the hood. But Lord, have we had some fun.
Yeah, we sure have. It's really brought the knowledge to life to have someone to talk about, living your design together, and all in all the thick of it, and all the ups and downs, and the mutations that are happening on this planet right now. Just even since we started hanging out in 2010, this world has changed a lot.
A tremendous amount. And we in it have changed a tremendous amount as well. I mean, here we are in the quarter of mutation and talking about mutation, and it is nothing but mutation. You're either receptive to it or you're not paying attention, one or the other. But this is a major transformative moment. And it is just such a delight to have people in our circle that are paying attention and mutating.
hmm hmm Well, let me real quick here. Why don't I think I'll just bring up your chart for 1 second, and just allow people the chance to take a look here, if you're okay with that.
Oh, yeah.
Um,
Oh, yeah. This is a place to be seen. We take our mask and our costumes off here.
yeah. So I mean, Tom is to me, Tom really is the future, is what's coming. He's a 6'2", and very, very tuned into the coming mutation, and four parts right. This is where we're moving as a species, and I think three of your four channels are projected channels. I think you really have a sense of what it is to be, not to be, but to relate to projector life to some degree. And so, yeah, I mean, I think one thing we've really enjoyed really exploring together over the years is our rightness and coming into our rightness and because if I remember correctly, I think we found variable around the same time and
Mhm.
started experimenting with it at the same time and and kind of gone through that process of reading and studying and you know understanding it and then whoa living it is a whole other thing. So um how's that process been for you to come to know and love and get to know yourself as a quadrate?
Thank you for that question. It was a process because intellectually I knew what it was to be a quad right, but I'd never had the experience of what it was to be a quad right. And once you experience something, you can deny a lot of things in your world. My son's across the denial. Boy, am I good at denying things. And the denial is not a river in Egypt. It's the ability not to pay attention and the ability to stay alone. But when you're confronted with the absolute truth, and this is what human design does for so many people, it's like, oh my God, how do they know that? Okay. Because we're no longer on the outside observing, we're on the inside seeing what's there. And a person who can read a design chart is really quite a remarkable thing. It gets people's attention. Okay. All right. So the process for me in getting in touch with rightness, I'll never forget when Ra was teaching, he said, okay, that's it, folks. And everybody just kind of paused for like 30 seconds, which is a long time with a room full of people. And a guy, 30 seconds. And I said, what do you mean that's it? And he said, well, it's all out. I've done what I needed to do. Now it'll be talked about, discussed, argued, agreed with, and disagreed with for hundreds of years, but it's all out. I looked at him and said, no, it's not. And he said, what do you mean? I said, well, who knows, but who hasn't told us all yet? There's something coming, isn't there? And he said, yes, Tom, but it's not time yet, but it will be time. And that's what variable was, because I looked at all of human design and it was very, very intriguing and it definitely got my attention, but I didn't sense the transformational quality of it yet. Of course, this was only 7 or 8 years in design. But at any rate, after that period of time, in the second time he came to America to teach from Europe, that's when he started teaching beneath the lines, okay? Because everything was about type, strategy, and authority, type, strategy, and authority, type, strategy, and authority for so many years. And type, strategy, and authority will prevent you from going the wrong way, which is good. It prevents you from being the wrong person, which is good. But it doesn't necessarily put you on the path zeroed in correctly as yourself. It requires cognizance. And this is what variable is all about. It's your cognitive architecture. And to understand what that means is one thing, but to have an experience with how that actually operates. My experience with how that operates is I hear myself saying over and over and over again to people when I'm speaking, you know what I just said to you? I've never said to any other human being in my entire life. I've never even seen it or thought it that way. Okay, that's the receptive coming into view. Okay, when you're saying things that were not your thoughts. And if you think about it, 90% of the thoughts in our heads that are running around like a tape going over and over and over again were never our thoughts anyway. It was something that was installed on our hard drive that we eventually surrendered to. Welcome to the world of being conditioned. Okay, no one's fault, but welcome to the world of being conditioned away from who we are. The business of getting back to who we are is the whole purpose of design so that we can make decisions correctly as ourselves. So that's my opening salvo. One more thing I would say is that if you look at this design, what you see is 4 motors and an emotional manifesting generator, and you go, whoa, nuclear power plant. Well, I'm here to tell you this is a power plant that can be worn out, have a meltdown, and burn out. Okay. If you look closely, you'll see that my sun, my earth, my moon, and my authority are all in a projected element. Now, you've heard of a hermaphrodite. I'm a trimaphrodite. I'm the male energy in the sense that I'm a manifester. I'm the female energy in the sense that I'm a generator. And I'm something else in the sense that 70%, more than 70% of who and what I am is a projector. Now, all this didn't become meaningful to me until I got in touch with cognitive architecture. I understood cognitive architecture, but it didn't make a difference in my life. Here we are, 2020. Rod told me many, many, many years ago, Tom, in 2020, get ready for whatever it is that's going to hit the fan, hitting the fan. And boy, did it ever. I had to let go of everything that ever meant anything to me twice. I said, if I had to let go of anything more, there wouldn't be anything here except for a pile of clothes. And that's what real mutation is, letting go of what was installed on a hard drive and getting in touch with your own program, which is what we have a picture of and what we're looking at here today. So there you go, Pete.
Mm-hmm. Wow. And so that it just continues to unfold. So now, do you still consider yourself in your experiment? Do you feel like you're still experimenting, or do you feel that word experiment kind of at some point it has a different flavor to it, or a different um, you experience your design, you experience yourself differently, or does it still feel like you're experimenting?
I'm in a completely different world than I was in before I got into design. And while the process was happening, I didn't know it was happening. I understood design mechanically. It was presented to us by a very logical, paranoid, insecure messenger. Thank you, Ra, for your service. There's never anything detrimental to say about Ra. But that's the old way. It's the way out. He said it. I've made that piece of information available to everyone. It was in a course in Decent at the Biversity some years back. He said, this business of the heretic bringing in heresy and telling people what to do, it's the old way. It's the way out. No one's going to listen to that anymore. And so, like everybody else trained to do that, I spent my time trying to, do the best of my ability, explain the logics, the mechanics, and all this stuff of design. But I didn't particularly feel that I had been transformed that much by it yet. When I got in touch with, so the answer to your first question, am I still experimenting? Yes. The experiment never ends. But have I gotten a bit more assured and, shall we say, a little bit more cocky about it? Yes, I have. Because I'm used to watching people's jaws hit the table. And I'm used to my own heart and jaw hit the table as well. When I go, did I actually just say that to someone? I mean, it just came through. And I said it. And then I say to him, I'm surprised by it. I say, I can't believe I said that. I've never said that to anybody in my whole life. That's when I recognize something, that it isn't coming from a conditioned human being anymore. Maybe I'm not completely rid of conditioning, but I'm over being totally conditioned. I know the beauty of what it is to be a projector. I know the beauty of what it is to be an emotional manifester, which is hard to get. I've learned the beauty of saying no as opposed to saying yes. I have the 46 hexagram in my design. It's my Venus. I don't have the 29. I'm not here to say yes, 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 yes. I'm here to say I can't say no to all that nonsense. If I say no to all that nonsense, how are we going to push upward into being in the gate of serendipity? How are we going to push up into the kingdom of heaven? Call it what you want. But whatever you call it, it's a better way than what we have experienced up to this point, which is the entire reason for human design to come into the world, as well as a number of other tools. Human design is not a belief system to replace your old belief system. It's an experiment, and it always will be. But some experiments work out. We go, wow, there's something to be discovered there, and others don't work out. It's the difference between the 6 and the 3. If it weren't for threes, thank you, Peter, for your service, going through all this discovery process for us, we wouldn't know what it was. I was not born a 6-2, I was born a 3-2. Became a 6-2 after my Chiron return. Proceeded for 20 years in that process, still experimenting, hoping, wondering, okay? But past Chiron, You're in the saddle now. So the answer to your question is yes and no. There's a yes to the fact that I'm still in the experiment, and there's the experience of the experiment having proved to be true and empirical over and over and over and over again, which makes me receptive and receptive and receptive and receptive. And that's when things come through that were not my thoughts, were not Ra's thoughts, were not Peter's thoughts, were not anybody's thoughts. It came from somewhere outside of us. Notice that this head center starts outside of the body and comes into the body. And what does the mind do with it? Make it smaller than it is so we can get our heads around it, and it's called a point of view. Perfectly valid as long as we realize that it's a point of view. And what do most people do with their point of view? Say, oh no, your point of view is wrong. You need to see it my way. No, we need to add these points of view together so that we can get a scan of the view and eventually start seeing the view. See why we're moving from strategic, I know, I'm in charge, I'm in control, to receptive, I know I'm not in charge. Peter, you're one of the guys that on your website, you said, relax, nothing's in control, no one's in charge. And I went, thank you for that, Pete. So again, yes to the experiment. It will always be that. You cannot even begin to imagine the amount of human design that will not be known in our lifetime. But it's coming. It's not about something we're going to do. It's about something we're going to be receptive to or not.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, you seem to have a great deal of passion about being a 6-2, supporting other 6-2s, this coming solar plexus mutation, and the planet moving into a 6-line background theme. And you've mentioned to me in several times, about what's coming, and your sense of what's coming. Would this be a good time? Do you feel like you want to share something about solar plexus mutation, moving into a 6-line theme, and what that inspires inside of you?
Big question and a very accurate question. Big answer. I'll try to keep it brief to a degree, but deep, short but not shallow. So the sacrum is where you make a commitment. You can get a sacrum to commit to something once. It'll go, mm-hmm. But if it's going to keep committing, it has to come from somewhere else. And the passion for that, as you mentioned, comes from the solar plexus. I've already mentioned that 70% of who and what I am is in a projected element, the solar plexus being one of the two motors there, the channel of community, the channel of moodiness. The channel of moodiness is a mirror channel to the channel of struggle, which is a kind of a, shall we say, less than just material way of finding purpose. The 4037 is a mirror channel to the 4426. The 4426 is, we know, tribal support, tribal success, but we've always thought of it as a competition. It's not a competition. It's a cooperation, because that channel of success, if it's mirrored by the community, would have to be communal success, wouldn't it be? Mutual success, wouldn't it be? The business of finding purpose would be about finding the spirit, the passenger in our material vehicle. Because we're finite beings, we're of the sense that we got to be in a hurry. We ain't got that much time. Well, we have an eternity, because the passenger doesn't disappear when the vehicle quits operating. How many of us are still driving the first car we owned? When you got into your new car, did you die? No. And so when we get over the idea that, the level of reality that's finite has a beginning, a middle, and an end. Okay, that's appropriate when you're talking about the vehicle. But when you're talking about the passenger in the vehicle, that's not true at all. All these people are having these near-death experiences. And I've had them myself on 2 occasions. And what we find out when we're going into that space is, wow, I'm not in my body anymore, but I'm still here. The passenger is not necessarily finite. It has a beginning, but not necessarily an end. Okay? So when we come to that cognizance and recognition of the truth of what this mechanical thing is more than mechanics. Ra didn't want to be a guru. He didn't want to be a woo-woo. He didn't want people imitating him. So he presented it as mechanical, but he was also an incredibly mystical being. He gave me a mystical reading 25 years ago, and I listened to it and I said, wow, what a bunch of new age nonsense. Now I'm listening to it and going, oh my God, he really was a very mystical being. He had a very mystical experience. This wasn't his invention. This came from elsewhere. Look at the head center. It comes from elsewhere, the inner truth. And then we return to the inner truth to come up with the aha, I've got it. And then we got to try to explain it. If you look at my only conscious voice, it is a 23, the gate of explanation, third line. Same voice as Ra. That doesn't make me Ra. It just means I have that same adaptive ability to take a look at things more receptively and expand upon them. And when you let go of what you think you know, that makes room on your hard drive for other things to come in. Thoughts that you didn't necessarily think. Maybe you got something from outside that you resonated with, and that's why you wanted to repeat that. So yeah, the passion comes from the solar plexus, and it comes from finding the spirit whose principles I can agree with that can be mutually beneficial to all of us.
Beautiful, beautiful. Yeah, you're 5539, your channel of emoting here. Um, Seems like you kind of have a different relationship to that than the way I would normally think of that. Because I don't think of you as or I don't experience you as you know, super wavy person. It seems more you're about, provoking, you're always provoking the spirit of other people.
Yep,
Um,
yep.
so,
I got that talent from being provoked myself.
mhm.
Being an emotional person, and emotions have had a bad rap for so long because it is that up and down on the wave, all right? And we know to be emotional, you have to be the Buddha on the surfboard. You want to find the center of that wave. Instead of bopping up and down in the amplitude of the wave, you find the center of the wave, all that stillness in the midst of all that wave, okay? So that's why they have to wait to be clear. But when they are clear, there is nothing more beautiful than the true emotional spirit being expressed in the clear night air. At the same time, there's nothing more toxic than less than clear emotionality flying off the handle. It's the source of so much violence. Not the only source, but it's the source of a lot of violence. The moment we reduce the amplitude of the wave, that's what we mean about waiting till you're clear.
Hmm.
Buddha on the surfboard is not at the top and he's not at the bottom. He's in the center, perfectly still. That's what's coming. Emotions have gotten all their bad rap because they've never been clean and clear. That's what's coming. So people who are emotional are charged with that. If you get into a situation with a splenic person and an emotional person, the moment the splenic person leaves the room, whatever that was, it's over. It's still churning in that emotional person. And it churns and churns and churns until they find some peace and truth and satisfaction in it. So it's a burden and a privilege to be that, just like it's a burden and a privilege to be anything. We don't need to pull out any big violins for anybody and play any sad songs. We all have our highlights and we all have our shadows. And even the shadows are there to bring us to our highlights. So it's a process. Once again, I'm still answering your first question. Are you still experimenting? You betcha I'm still experimenting. but I'm getting more confident in where we're going because I'm really starting to feel that. The spleen was about survival. The mind was about, well, okay, we've survived. Who would want to be here if it's not at least interesting? But when you get to the solar plexus, who would care if we survived and it's interesting if it doesn't feel good at the end of the day? The moment we can feel what there is to feel, we'll be a lot more cautious what we do to ourselves and others. So there's an evolution in these awarenesses. We have two awarenesses that are functioning. One that has no power to commit anything. It's just the mind. Now, again, everybody wants to rag on the mind. We're not Hindus. We're not saying no mind. We're saying noisy mind is pretty useless. Quiet mind is absolutely beautiful because you can connect that to the will, the heart, the willpower, the heart. Then you have wholeheartedness. Coming from wholeheartedness has nothing to do with coming from fear for survival. It has everything to bringing Eden back to this world, however you want to interpret that.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So, again, speaking of mutation, you you got to do the soundboard for Raw for many years. I don't remember how many, and also I remember you telling me that having these headphones on, taking this in acoustically for so many years, it did something to you. Just
Yeah.
the mutative quality of the individual voice.
Yeah. Notice I'm an archetype. That's all about acoustics. I would listen to the words that Ra would say, and they were meaningful to a degree, but the tone of his voice is what got my attention. And that's what's mutative. The individual is all about acoustics. The individual is also where mutation happens. The tribe is just here sharing their rules. The collective here is just sharing their wisdom. Isn't that hilarious? Collective wisdom. Collective wisdom, military intelligence, and jumbo shrimp. I'm not sure how these words ever got put in the same phrase, but they did somehow, probably a result of conditioning. But the archetype, it's the original. So when I hear something that sounds like it's coming from source, I hear that tonally. That gets my attention. I go back and listen to that over and over and over again. I'm a tribal person, but I'm also an archetype with an individual capacity to express what my experience is. But what I'm really expressing is the mutation, because 6-2s are not history buffs. 6-line beings are not history buffs. We're not interested in what the monkeys have already done. We're interested in what's possible they haven't even thought of yet. That's the receptivity, being receptive to something else. They're really taking Darwin on right now. They're saying, well, it's not necessarily the fittest, the survival of the fittest. That's all competition. The only species that is responsible for killing more of itself than anything else on the world is human beings. You won't find that amongst, once in a great while, there'll be something violent within the species. But generally speaking, that's not something you see. Pretty rare.
Mhm.
Generally, they're eating something else than themselves. We kill and don't even eat it. But that's because we have free will, which is a beautiful and good thing if we're receptive to source material. If we're listening to the fear-based nonsense on this world, well, we know where that leads us. Competition, which leads us to battlefields, which leads us to becoming killer monkeys. First time I was ever referred to as a killer monkey, I was a little bit indignant about that. I thought, you arrogant bastard. Speak of yourself. Don't speak of me. But then I had to stop and realize there was like 30 wars going on at that moment in time.
Mhm.
That was just us.
Yeah. Well, I'm trying to think about the first time you gave me a reading, and if the things you told me then, and how I was, you know, I'd been to India. How dare you tell me that I'm being conditioned, and I had the BT, I call it the BTI badge, the been to India badge. It's like, so well, also you also have a really interesting history of not only doing Ra's sound and having that acoustic transformation or mutation, but you got to live with him at certain points, and you're one of the very few beings on this planet who's got to live in close quarters with Ra and his family and get to know him in a different way too. And not to make this all about Ra here necessarily, but I think you have some interesting wisdom here for us, or in terms of understanding design through his life,
Yeah,
and understanding Ra the man versus Ra Uruhu the clarion.
yeah.
um, would you like to
Yeah.
share anything about that experience?
What a beautiful question. Yeah, I mean, it was a rare experience. Ra was not warm and fuzzy tribal kind of guy. Occasionally, after he had the experience with the voice, he was weakened by that. So I carried his briefcase around for him because it was too heavy for him to carry around. He would get tired of it, right? And I know what that feels like because I've been through mutation and I got kind of weakened as well. But we get weakened of the nonsense in order to become aware of the truth. So it's not necessarily a negative thing. All right. But at any rate, Ra, he was cold to touch. You touch his skin, which was a very rare experience. Okay. Ra didn't like being touched unless it was a lover of his. All right. But he didn't like that. Most individuals don't care to be touched. They prefer to be left alone unless they're particularly interested in you for some reason or another. And when I touch him, he was cold. He was like a reptile. He was very cold to the touch. At the same time, he really had to play the badass because he didn't want to be considered another woo-woo. Remember, this wasn't something he made up and it wasn't something he asked for. It's something that was forced upon him. He referred to the experience as having been raped. This wasn't something he asked for. It wasn't something he knew was coming. It was something that he was not given a choice about. And so he had this manifester badass kind of thing, but that's not who he really was. He was really a very kind-hearted man who loved his children, loved his life, loved himself, loved his wife. But like everybody else, he grew up very conditioned, and just like any of the rest of us. And one day he looked at it, and here's a guy who has, I don't know, 10 or 11 first lines in his design. And he woke up one day and he said, I don't know who this life is, but it's not mine. His father wanted him to be a professor and own a business and this, that, and the other. He was interested in sex, drugs, and rock and roll. This didn't mean that much to him, so he had all kinds of difficulties there. But nonetheless, being in his presence when he was private, he was a very different person. Number one, there was not a lot of exchange, but when there was, here's why there was exchange. He knew I was a quadrite. I didn't know that. He knew I was a 6'2". I scarcely knew what that meant when I first met him. I went down to take what I thought was a weekend course in the design. 14 years later, I'm still sitting with a set of headphones on listening to courses of design. So I had no idea what I was getting into. And most people today will not know how large human design is. There are so many levels that we can talk about them. It won't mean that much to a lot of people, but it's coming. All right. So at any rate, the experience of being in his home was he did not have to put on any airs. He could just be himself, which was a huge relief to him. He was a fairly quiet, fairly calm individual. And he said to me one time, he said, Tom, it's a basic antagonistic relationship between you and I. You're tribal, and that's the most threatening thing in the world to an individual. And yet, an individual might be the most threatening thing to a tribal person. But somehow or another, you're one of the few people that ever has anything interesting to say to me. People are always coming up to me and saying, human design is so interesting. And the moment I say that, I want to kill him on the spot. I know it's interesting. I don't give a damn if it's interesting. I want to know if it keeps its promises. I want to know if people will actually get it, if the information is transferable and it'll have an effect upon people that would be beneficial. He said, so you say these things to me in their original thoughts. Archetype, 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 their original thoughts. You take in the information, you have a response to it, and then you come up with something original. I rarely get to experience that, which is why you were commandeered, probably against your own will, to be my recording engineer. Plus the fact that you could edit this stuff and get it back to me in a reasonable amount of time. And that was what I wanted. I couldn't get that out of New Sun Service Americas. There were a couple of projectors and they wanted to control it. All the organizations around design have wanted to control it. Okay, all right. They have been wonderfully functional things, because now when we talk about human design, when I first told people I was into human design, they said, oh, so you design humans, huh? No, but if I did, I'd probably do something different, okay? No, I don't design human beings. I discern the design of human beings. And when I first read the things to people, there were no there were no courses on readings. We were given the basic information and we were told to go out and do a reading, and we all sat around and said, where does it all come from? That's the keynotes. You string the keynotes together to make a sentence out of a genetic sequence, and people go, how do they know that? So Rob picked me, or commandeered me, or selected me to be someone who could do something for him, because he saw I had an unconscious channel of talent, that I was an archetype, I was a quadrite, and a community person that would take this with passion to the world. That's why he chose me. Mm-hmm. Very, very different man in his own home, because he didn't have to have a facade. He could just be himself. You'd be surprised how relaxed and still and calm Ra could be. He didn't choose peace, he had it forced into him. But he was a peaceful manifester when he wasn't out amongst the unaware world. Beautiful. Very, very different experience to have. And I've never said those exact words to anybody until I just said them to you, Pete, in response to your question, because I had to ponder, well, what was that like? And I had to go back to the experience and remind myself of what that experience was. And it was night and day. Go to class, there's the performer. Go home, there's the man. Yeah.
So your human design, let's say consulting practice has evolved significantly over the last 20 years. What does that look like for you now? What brings you the most satisfaction working with people?
Let's start at the beginning with that. You and I sitting over at 4461. What was the name of the street?
I lived on Brain Street.
Yeah, 4469, whatever it was. Alertness to the inner truth. You volunteered to produce my first website, which I never really used that much and got into it, but I thought I should have one, okay? And what were we calling it?
Human Design Evolutions. Evolution.
There you go. About evolutions. Where did that come from? From you. From the conversation, and you and I sat there at the 4461 address you were living at, alertness, coming to meet the inner truth. That's where we were sitting. And I sat there on the porch talking to my sleeping Phoenix friend who had a certain amount of information about design, but more than he really realized. And when I said things to you that came through, you just went, wow. And that grabbed you. But it started off with the idea of human design needs to evolve. It needs to evolve to find the spirit in it as well as the mechanics of it. Ra claimed to be nothing but a mechanic, and he wanted to produce it all as mechanics. But how could you really be a mechanic if you have no respect for the master mechanic? The likelihood that we just popped up out of the primordial sludge. Yeah, my Mercedes did as well, right? A Mercedes is a very complicated piece of equipment. It didn't pop out of the primordial sludge. There was an incredible amount of intelligent design that went into that. Now, you want to make a scientist nervous? Start talking about intelligent design. Oh, you're getting way too close to intelligent design for me to want to continue this conversation. And then my provocation would come up. Oh, really? So the idea of intelligence is insulting or threatening to you? Well, I certainly hope that your universe doesn't get so small that it literally crushes the life out of you. And they would get so pissed off at me. And I would just go, yeah, well, you know, the difference between a Mercedes and our bodies is the Mercedes will do nothing but wear out. You can replace parts, you can rebuild parts. Our bodies will repair themselves if you're not constantly causing trouble to them by being something other than yourself. You're asleep at the wheel, looking out the rear view mirror, not paying attention to where you're going, only paying attention to where you're running from. That's a lot of wear and tear on the vehicle. So back to the idea of mechanics. Yes, it's nice to know the mechanics, but there's a passenger in that vehicle who has a spirit that is not necessarily finite. So that whole evolutionary thing, I thought, well, I really am amazed. I've been taking design, I don't know, 10 years at that point. And I thought, good Lord, this is just so incredible, but it's got to evolve. It's got to become meaningful. It's got to become purposeful. We have to find the spirit in order to find purpose in our life. There's those mirror channels again. We have to become mutually successful in order to have community instead of warfare. We have to accept that all upright bipeds are created by the same creator with different endowments. Nobody brings everything to the table. We bring our design to the table. Everybody has something to contribute. And we come to recognize the spirit that's involved in this. And I said to Ra, I said, you're way too damned intelligent to have that much respect for mechanics and have no respect for the mechanic. And he looked at me and he said, what the hell did you just say to me? I said, you heard it. Ego to ego. We used to provoke the hell out of one another, but it was highly entertaining. So he looked at me and he said, well, you know that's why I chose you. And I said, no, I didn't know that, but I'm coming to know that. He said, I didn't choose you because I liked you. I didn't choose you because I wanted to be around you. I chose you because of your talent, your archetypal energy, and your ability to do and be receptive to where this is going. You are. I'm not. I'm the old way. You're the new way. So many outrageous conversations that I have with Ra that nobody really asked me about them because very few people know what my history with Ra was. But I'm always appreciative when someone does because there's a lot in there. And you're right, it's not specifically about Ra. He never wanted that kind of attention. But it's about understanding what this man went through and what he had to go through in order to deliver this message. It's just so valuable to human beings, to us, without ever getting to see it. He's a guy that plants avocado trees that will never eat avocados off that tree. What's that called? Altruism. That's an extremely high quality of what it is to be a human being. When you're altruistic, you not only care about your children, but you care about your children's children. And when you hear Ra talk about being in the old way, he said, you know, I'm really a very nice guy. I'm trying to protect all these six-line beings who are going to take this to where it actually needs to go, that I will never take it. I will not see it, but they will bring it into the world. So that's where the evolutionary part of it came, sitting on the porch with you and going, stuff comes through. And I found that you were receptive to it. Obviously, you're still here after all these years. You're a good analyst. You have a good organization. You're probably more successful at it than I am.
Well, you're available. You're here. You're available, and you are. I mean, your practice is still work. You're still working with people, so
Oh
people
yeah.
can get in touch with you, and
Oh yeah.
and as I understand, you're not doing so much readings as much as you're doing like consulting sessions and just kind of like we do, just get together and see where the energy goes, see what comes out, see,
Exactly.
or you know,
Exactly. That's the receptive way. Okay. A foundational reading is important. If you're going to stack 104 stories of construction material up, it's nice to have a foundation, but it's just a foundation. Who wants to live on a slab of concrete? We want to build the house in which we live. And in this regard, what the house is, the vehicle and the passenger in it. So the foundation's valuable. To know the notes and to know the words gives you the ability to sing the song, but at some point it's about singing the song as the song actually was intended to sound. Archetype, very acoustic, very acoustic. See what I'm saying? And one of the things that was so attractive about you was your tonality. You're an incredibly creative musician and a very prolific musician. And what really got me into you was your tone. Remember when you first came to design? Remember what the trade was? You gave me your early recordings. And I would listen to those recordings and I said, this is so tonally interesting. Tonal, coming from source, closer to source than what most rock and roll boogie woogie stuff is. You were doing stuff that was incredibly meaningful on a tonal level, not to mention the lyrics, the words, what it was about. And I'll never forget when I first heard this song you wrote, Walking with the Angels. I said to a mutual friend of ours, I said, who is that? And that person said to me, that's Pete. I said, no way. She said, Yahweh. And these are the kinds of things that eventuate. We need to be able to be surprised, to be satisfied, to be interested, to be sweet, to be recognized. I spent 21 years in design never being recognized. Didn't want anything to do with it because it all seemed like something of the old way. Competitive, listen to me, don't listen to anybody else. All that competition was never anything I could be interested in. Quadrite, archetype, community, emotions. I couldn't be any of that. But I couldn't let go of design. It's a virus. Once it gets in you, it becomes part of you, a very mutative part. But there you
Well,
go.
well, like you said, we're Ra mentioned in 2020, that's a 7-year countdown to 2027. We're and just like a 7-year deconditioning process or 7-year cycle, we're almost halfway through that. So 2023 should be pretty interesting with what's coming up, and in response to what you just said about your receptive way of in your the way you relate to design. This might be a good time. Good, like you say on your voicemail. Good guy to talk to. You reached Tom Pfeiffer, good guy to talk to.
Well,
So
yeah.
this might be a good time to talk to Tom Pfeiffer, and I'd really love to open the door to I just kind of wanted this to be like an introduction today, and this has been a great introduction to you, for to share with the world here, and love to open the door for other opportunities. Like you said, you have all these stories with Raw. You have all this untapped, untapped. Well, whatever it is, it's all inside. It's all in there. So,
It really is. It
um,
really is.
I'd love to see if we can bring some of that out, and support you to support all the other people out here who could really use a fresh perspective. You
And a
know.
fresh life that
Hmm.
is actually their life.
Hmm.
Oh my God, what a privilege it is to go from anger to peace, from frustration to satisfaction,
Hmm.
from bitterness to sweetness, from disappointment to surprise. And the whole thing about what's coming, it hasn't been here yet. We don't know what it is. Some of us can smell it. We have a flavor of it, but we don't know what it is yet. So what a privilege it is to be a part of a mission, to be a part of a call that's worthy of an answer. You don't have to be a six-line being to be separate from the call. All of us can be relatively irritated by what we see in the world and want something better. And each and every person from the 1-3 to the 6-3 has a function, has a role, has a place to fulfill.
Mm.
This is not just about any particular one. It's about all of us. It's all inclusive. No winners, no losers, all winners. What a beautiful possibility. See how it's easy for me to be impassioned by that?
Mm.
Yeah, it's real easy to be impassioned by that. So yeah, I'm grateful since the day I met Peter Burrs, and I'm grateful that he's my brother and that he's my friend, and that he's an incredible student and teacher of human design to benefit everyone, himself and everyone that comes in contact with him. Can you imagine what business would be like if the reason we were in business is, well, look, I have a product or a service that will actually improve your life, and the reason I would like you to have it is because it's improved my life. Well, that's a lot of nice words, but when people can actually see the difference in someone's life, can you see the difference in my life, Pete? I can definitely see the difference in yours. So here we are, a testament to the fact that human design is empirical and actually keeps its promises.
Mhm, mhm.
But it requires vigilance. It requires paying attention. And if you're a very strategic person, that you're not out of the picture, you're going to be the interpreters of the receptive to the strategics, because we're mostly strategic on this world. That's going to start disappearing. That's going to start being replaced with receptive. It was receptive when we were 5-centered beings. And then when we became 7-centered beings, it was strategic. Now we're going back to being receptive. If you look up on the world and you run around and see pyramids and you see these gigantic rocks that are formed in different shapes and you couldn't slip a razor blade in between them, we can't do that today. You get the joke? We're returning to something. You know, we've got all this stuff about we know everything. We know very little. If you know 1% of a thousandth of a percent, you know a lot. But there's so much more to know. There's so much more to experience. This is what human design is opening up. But there's more than one revelation coming through my mouth. This isn't about fundamentalism. This is about anything that's coming from source. Pay attention to that. It will get your attention. And then pay attention to it. So much more to be said, so many stories to tell. I'll tell you about stories. Most of my stories are interesting. Most of them are true. The rest of them are at least interesting. And they may be true. We'll wait and see. But yeah, I got stories.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Tom. Really, so much gratitude to you, and really appreciate your that you know bringing the love into your human design and for all of us, and
Yeah.
bring it alive with that that essence of life and love there, and embodying it yourself. So
It's so mutual, Pete. It's so reciprocal between us. That's the beautiful thing, to see men getting along with one another. Men motivated by love that they're passionate about. Love and sex, two different things, okay? We're talking about love. You can add sex to it and it can be beautiful if it's really love motivated. But if it's fear motivated, well, we all have a lot of experience with where that goes, okay? You're building a ship to wreck. But what about the idea of a relationship being a ship in which you're actually relating to another person? It doesn't have to sink. It doesn't have to be another heap of trash at the bottom of the ocean. That's the potential. That's the possibility here. And it's very, very easy to get very, very excited about.
excellent, excellent. All right,
Thank you,
brother.
Pete.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time today. Hopefully more to come, and thank you everyone for watching. Really appreciate you being here. I'll upload Tom's details here if you need to reach out. If you want to reach out, you feel a call to connect. Again, no competition here. Let's
No.
spread the love with all of us here, not just the love, but we're all here to support each other and through these times. So
And when has Pete Burb and Tom Pfeiffer ever competed with one another? Never. So it isn't just talk, folks. We know of where we speak. It creates a beautiful relationship amongst people. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. We got some good stories, which are for a different different talk here.
If you want storytelling, we do storytelling. There's no end to it. But this is more than stories. This is stories that produce meaning and truth and beauty and goodness.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Put the spirit back in the mechanics, and then people are really more hungry for design than you can imagine. Yeah.
Yeah. Wonderful. All right, brother. Thank you again, and thank you all for watching today. And have a wonderful rest of your six line day.
Thanks, Pete, and thanks everybody I don't know yet.
All right. Bye for
Adios,
now.
my friend.
Okay. Take care.
Go in peace.